Hey guys, welcome to Chapter 2. In Chapter 2 we're going to be talking about cascading style sheets, otherwise known as CSS. We have 4 different parts to this chapter. We have Section 1, which will just be a basics presentation, a slideshow presentation. I just want you to get down the basic syntax of CSS. And in Section 2 we'll start our project. We're going to continue on our Blue Web Developer Directory project. We're going to design the home page. We're going to separate blocks of code and style them via external style sheets. And we'll be looking at more CSS selectors and styling, and finally we'll be looking at the new CSS3 features, and we'll also be working with background images. So what is CSS? It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and CSS is a style sheet language. It's not a markup or a programming language. It's a style sheet language that is basically used to separate the design from the design and the formatting from the markup or the content of the document. The CSS specifications are maintained by the W3C Worldwide Consortium, and like I said, we've been doing it inline. The reason you want to have an external style sheets, there's a couple reasons. One is it's just good to separate. It's always good to separate presentation from any kind of content or logic or anything like that. And another thing is it takes the weight, it lowers the file size of the HTML document. It's just a much more efficient and cleaner way to do it. Alright, so you need to link an external style sheet to an HTML document in order for the document to see the CSS. And it's very easy to do. I have an example right here, and it's very important that this be placed in the head tag of the document. The attributes here, rel, href, they can all be in any order that you want. The type attribute isn't needed, but I would definitely suggest that you use it. So we have a link tag, and this just the link points something else, another file, to the HTML document. And we have the rel tag, and we just want to put style sheet inside of the rel tag. And next we want to add the link to, we want to link the file. So if you have the CSS file in the same folder or area as the HTML document, here you would only need to put file.css or whatever you named it .css. If you have it, in most cases it's in a CSS folder. It's in a folder that's actually named CSS, so it would be css/file.css. And the type just tells it that it's text and it's CSS. This could also be text JavaScript if you were using JavaScript. I would definitely suggest the type attribute. And then here we just have an example of what it would look like in a real web page. We have the head tags. You can see that it's in the head, and then the body continues. So that's how you link a style sheet to a document. Alright guys, so the div and the span elements are used in CSS to separate a certain block of code or a certain element, so you can apply your own style to it. Div and span have no specific meaning, and what that means is, say you have an H1 tag. If whatever you put in the middle of the H1 tags is going to be a heading, and the text will increase and it does something to the code. Now if you just put a plain div or a plain span around anything, it's not going to change anything about that element or that code. You're the one who's going to define that. You're going to give the style to it. So it's used for custom styling, really. And the main difference between these two, div and span, is that div is a block level element and span is an inline level element. So if you have a div, it's going to automatically put lines on on the top and the bottom. It's going to separate onto a new line. Span is inline, which means you could put a span tag next to anything and it will run alongside of it, as opposed to put it on a new line. And the ID and class attributes are usually what you would use with the div and span. So you could label that certain block or that certain element that you want to style. So here I have an example of header and, of ID in class. We would have the header code here, which would be an H1 tag or whatever, maybe an image, and we would give a div with an ID of header, so we could actually style it using that ID in the style sheet, which I'll show you on the next slide. And a div, or any element for that matter, can only have one ID. It can have many classes. So here I have a class of space, and maybe you have space defined as a class that's going to add a space under it. You might have margin or padding under it, so you could apply that class to this. And you could also apply any other class by just spacing it out, and then just say another class, and then you'd have two classes around this object. You'd have space and another class. So yeah, that's the main difference between IDs and class. And the syntax is a little different in the CSS style sheet, which I'll show you next. So this is how you would use the CSS in the CSS file. And we're going to look at this part first, and this is from the HTML file. We define our ID and class. Like I said, you can have anything in here. Let's just say maybe there's like a heading and an image, maybe a logo, and we wrap that in a div tag, and we applied the ID of header, and we have two classes of space and another class. Now that on its own is going to do absolutely nothing to the code inside. We have to go to the CSS file that we linked a few slides back. We had, I think it was file.css, and in that file we want to open it, and we want to add our ID and classes in there. Now the most important thing to know about IDs and classes is that an ID uses a pound sign and a class uses a period. That's pretty much the only thing that is different. The styling is the exact same. You just always want to remember an ID is pound and a space is a period. So inside the header, we gave it the styling of width of 800 pixels. So whatever's in here is going to be 800 pixels long, and height of 100 pixels, so it'll be 100 pixels high, and then the background of black, this is the hexadecimal for black, and that means that everything within these tags is going to have a background color of black. Now we have the class, because we also added a class of space, so we took that class and we just applied a margin to the bottom of the div, and we just applied a margin of 10 pixels. So whatever's in here would have under it would have a margin of 10 pixels, and that's where I got the name space. It'll add a space to whatever we add that class to. And we don't just have to use this class here. We could add it to anything. We could have a sidebar, and we could add a class of space to that, and it would do the same thing. So we're not limited to just one block of code. So I'd like to stop here for now. I think we definitely have the core knowledge of CSS and HTML to actually start our project. So I'm going to stop here, and we'll start our project, and I'll give more explanation during the creation of our website.